Along with Last of Us, the Uncharted series is one of the main reasons I wanted to get a PlayStation 4. I have finished the Uncharted Collection, Uncharted 1, Uncharted 2, and Uncharted 3, and I'm ready to give my opinion, my review for all those games. What's going on, guys? Randall Thor 19, the man with the million, back again with another video. That's right, it is finally finished. I have completed the first 3 Uncharted games that were on the PS3 that were collected and put into the Uncharted Collection, and I'm ready to talk about each individual one, positives, the negatives, scoring each game. I'm gonna let you guys know all my thoughts about that stuff, and honestly, I don't even know where to begin. Everybody knows about the Uncharted series. It's been a staple of gaming and PlayStation since basically 2007 when Uncharted 1 Drake's Fortune came out. So I'm just gonna ramble. I'm just gonna talk about some stuff, and we'll go with Uncharted 1 first. So, basic story set up in Uncharted 1 is that there's this 400-year-old clue in the coffin of Sir Francis Drake, which you unearth on a submarine with Elena, and that sets off this huge chase to discover the treasure, the fabled treasure of El Dorado, the city of gold, right? And to be honest, this game, Uncharted 1, Drake's Fortune, doesn't really stand up to the annals of time, man. It doesn't stand up whatsoever. At least it ran at 60 frames on the PS4 Pro in the collection, so there was that. But there's not much good to say about the game other than Nolan North as Nathan Drake is fantastic, as he always is, as he is throughout the entire series, as he is usually in every game he does a voice acting job for. Now, the combat is simple. You can either have a pistol or a secondary gun along with a primary gun. It's usually a pistol or an Uzi and a machine gun like an AK-47 and stuff, which, I mean, basically the gameplay loop is guys come and attack you, you kill them with your weapons, you run out of ammo, you pick up new weapons or you pick up the ammo, rinse and repeat. The thing I didn't really like about this game is I felt the pacing was incredibly terrible. It felt like every time you go into a new room, you have to fight 15 dudes, and you make it around the corner and you fight for 15 dudes. The puzzles were kind of lame and uninteresting. And oh god, don't even get me started on those creatures at the end of the game. You know, the Spaniards that never left, that were kind of turned into those things from the evil, you know, plague of the El Dorado. Oh my god, I felt like I was playing a bad version of Gears of War at that point. It was just bad. So combat, not very interesting. Pacing, terrible for Uncharted 1. Voice acting, animations, they were strong. Like I said, Nathan, Sully, Alana, great characters throughout the entire trilogy. I'm not even really sure who was the villain. I can't even remember who the villain was in the first game. The first game was entirely unremarkable, in my opinion. There were some good moments, not to say like the entire thing was bad, but like getting onto the submarine that is docked in on top of a river, and that whole sequence was pretty good. But for the most part, Uncharted 1 was just a big ball of meh. It's just mediocre. You know, I'm glad that Naughty Dog was able to bounce from there and make better games. And this is kind of the story I always say, like when I hope games get sequels, like Sunset Overdrive to Sunset Overdrive 2, or Rise 1 to Rise 2, because Uncharted 1 Drake's Fortune is a mediocre game. But they were allowed to do that game. They improved upon themselves, and look what you got with the sequel, which we'll talk about here in a minute. You ended up with Uncharted 2, which is a unbelievably great game. And that's kind of like why I always push for these sequels I want to see on the Xbox, because the first game's usually kind of the worst, and then they keep on improving, and Sony gave Naughty Dog that experience. So at the end of the day, what is my rating for the very mediocre Uncharted 1? I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. 5 out of 10. Pacing, terrible. Story, but combat is just okay. It's just it's just a mediocre game. It's a game from 2007. It's 10 years old. It doesn't stand up. Now, we're going to come to Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 3, and we're going to talk about that. But in the overarching theme of the series, what I really did enjoy, even though I said the story in Uncharted 1 is not very good, I do enjoy the Indiana Jones aspect of this, finding this, supernatural kind of thing that is in each one of them to a certain extent, but also these cool places of history that are myths. I kind of like the treasure hunt that you go on in these games, right? So Uncharted 2, this is the game I've also heard about, along with The Last of Us, as the games you need to play, right? And Uncharted 2 didn't disappoint. Even with the expectations high, I felt it was so much of a better game. It looked really good for a game that came out in 2009, and it played extremely well. The combat seemed much improved. There was different type of weapons, but the thing that really elevated it to me was the pacing. The pacing of the game I thought was superb. There was enough time where you could soak in the environments, look around, have meaningful conversations with other characters, and they intersperse it well with the combat to then with the platforming around, which I don't mind the platforming. Like, I like the climbing puzzles. And it was the pacing is what they nailed. And of course, then they introduce those killer set pieces. And you guys know what I'm talking about. They're in the clips that are showing, right? We have the set piece on the train. What an incredible set piece. And I'm sure that set piece back in 2009 was probably mind-blowing. It's still really good. Still really good. You have the stuff with the helicopter chasing you and destroying the building, or you running away from the car. You jumping from car to car as each one explodes. There are some incredible set moments. You can even talk about the beginning. The very beginning when you're climbing out of the train as it falls. Really cool. I mean, there's only ever one way to go, but still a really cool visual altogether. So the story of Uncharted 2 is, Drake is down on his luck. He's looking for stuff. One of his buddies wants him to help him find the location of Shambhala, and he gets betrayed. And then you and your fellow thief, Chloe, kind of race in this cat and mouse chase against who's going to find the lost city of Shangri-La first. Chloe's a great character. She's your typical kind of sex pot to add in the games. But Elena does come back. Sully's not in it in Uncharted 2 that much, which is disappointing because I love Sully's character. I love the dialogue and the camaraderie that Nathan and Sully have, so I was disappointed to see he wasn't in it that much. But the climbing puzzles were really cool in this one. There was the one out in the ice when you're first trying to figure out what happened to those expeditions. You know what I'm talking about, where you're climbing all around in the ice, or the one where you're climbing around making this big huge dagger form. The climbing puzzles and those stuff were excellent in this one, especially in comparison to Uncharted 1. Such a great game all around. And the villain, the bald villain, I'm blanking on his name right now, was a much better villain than whoever was in the first one. I'm still blanking on that right now. Although, you gotta admit, the boss fights aren't particularly that good in these games, though. The boss fight for 1 was basically a QTE segment at the end, which I'm never a fan of QTE segments. And the boss fight in 2 was you run around and shoot these exploding pods next to the guy who's chasing you, who's supposed to be immortal. But they toned down the supernatural stuff. Like, you no longer, even though you did have to fight those guardians who were tougher to kill, at least there wasn't that many of them. Like, at the end of the first game where you had to fight those creatures, I just didn't like those creatures whatsoever. So Uncharted 2 lived up to the hype. I'm going to give that game a 9. So we have a 5 for Uncharted 1 and a 9 for Uncharted 2. Still holds up, even though it's a game from 2009. Which will then bring us to Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. Now, this is a game that I've gotten a lot of mixed tweets about. Some people love the game. A lot of people told me that it's not very good. It's better than Uncharted Drake's Fortune, and it's not as good as Uncharted 2. So, basic story setup for this one is you're on the search for the fabled Atlantis of the Sands. As you gotta find this lost city in the middle of the Arabian desert and all the stuff that kind of comes with it. And like I said, I like the Indiana Jones aspect of it. I like these fabled cities and mythological quests. Like, I'm into that stuff. I'm into those things. So, like, when you constantly find out more information or do those puzzles to solve the next thing, like, you know, the kid in me, like, yes, like, I think it's really cool. And this one has a lot more Victor Sullivan in it. There's the stuff with Drake's childhood at the beginning, which I thought was great. They introduced Marlowe, who's this villain who's played by Helen Mirren that, you know, impacted Nathan's childhood and his life, which I thought was kind of cool. And you're fighting up against these clandestine organization, the shadowy clandestine organization that uses like these weird like mind control drugs to a certain extent into you, which there are a couple sequences where you're kind of like tripping out or tripping balls. One where you're in the desert walking around, which I think went on a little bit too long for its own good. Like, I mean, you kind of knew what was going to happen. You were going to find all that stuff, but I think it went on a little bit too long. And some of the other stuff where you're kind of going crazy, it's cool at first, but then the more they kind of use it, not so much. Now, one of the things I have written here in my notes is that for whatever reason, I don't know, I can't put my finger on it, but the combat felt off in this game. It felt different from Uncharted 2 slightly. It was kind of hard to say why. Like, I was screwing around with the sensitivity so much because I didn't feel like the aiming was right or something. I don't know. Like, I kind of was like screwing around with that the whole game. But I really like to focus on Drake's childhood. And of course, the character, the animations, the dialogue between everybody is just top notch, like top of the field in video games, to be honest with you. I mean, Last of Us is a better game and more personal story. This stories are more kind of like they're just fun, right? But they're not like personal like Last of Us is. Now, this game also has way more set pieces. Some of them are incredible, but there's almost too many of them. Because at some point, when you have too many set pieces, they all just kind of become, oh, here comes another one. I kind of like the approach they had in Last of Us where it was a set piece and you knew it was there for a reason, so it made it more impactful, or the kind of dotted along the experience of Uncharted 2. But Uncharted 3 was like, boom, we're going to hit you, boom, set piece, set piece, set piece, set piece. And one of the things I didn't like about Uncharted 3 was like you would explore this area and then you had to fight your way out. I don't really like that, and I didn't really like it in Uncharted 2 where you would come and you would explore and you would figure the stuff out, and then the enemies would just catch up to you. I always kind of hate that in movies and video games, and I didn't really like it in either one of those, although I understand why, because otherwise you wouldn't have a video game. Now, I also didn't like the spiders in Uncharted 3 whatsoever. All the different segments you had running from the spiders or spider scorpions or whatever they're called. I didn't really care for those. And I did kind of feel at the end of the game, at the end of Uncharted 3, that it felt like it would be a good place to end the series. Honestly. Like, if that was the end of the series, it would have felt good. You know, Drake fought against his demons, so to speak. It looked like he reconciled with Elena, who he truly loves. And you're done with all these quests. And we know what goes on in Uncharted 4 because the series continues. And I'm interested in seeing how the story continues in Uncharted 4. And I will be playing it and putting on a review whenever I finish it. But the Uncharted Collection is a really cool experience, if not only for Uncharted 2. Yes, Uncharted 2 is the best. Yes, Uncharted 3 is nowhere near as good as Uncharted 2, but it's better than Uncharted 1, and it has some set pieces that you have to see to believe. The stuff in the plane, the stuff in the burning house as it goes down, running away from the ship. There are some really cool set pieces. It's just, I think they overused them to a certain extent, and I felt like the story wasn't nearly as good as in Uncharted 2. Uncharted 2, you were discovering these things as you went. It felt like you were discovering all this stuff. Where Uncharted 3, you kind of stumbled upon it, especially at the end of the game. It felt like they rushed it. At the end of the game, you just stumbled upon the place you needed to go, unlike figuring out where it was in Uncharted 2 or even Uncharted 1, and I felt that was kind of a mistake. You know, like, just, you're an explorer, and you kind of just stumbled into the city, you know? You kind of just walking along the desert, and you stumble into a city where the enemies are and stuff like that. So I kind of felt that was lazy, especially for someone who's a treasure hunter and an explorer like Nathan Drake is. But all in all, really enjoyed the collection. I finally got to play 3 of the games I really wanted to on the PlayStation 4, Uncharted 1, Uncharted 2, Uncharted 3, and now we're done. Now we can get to move on to Uncharted 4, Horizon Zero Dawn, and a whole bunch of other PS4 exclusive games that I've been looking to play. Anyways, guys, as for all the collection, 5 for Uncharted 1, 9 for Uncharted 2, and an 8 for Uncharted 3. I'll give the collection an overall score of an 8 I hope you guys enjoyed the review. If you did, please hit that like button. Consider subscribing for more content, as it is always coming. And I will see everybody in the next video. Later.